Turn my skull on for this one. All right. So, if the screen looks a little different than the other videos that I've made, it's because it is. And we're not going to be discussing how to dissect a natal chart or anything about looking into astrology, personal astrology. What we're going to discuss is astrology in the Bible. And a lot of times I've been out in a casual coffee shop writing my natal charts, doing whatever, and I run into people who think I'm a devil worshiper. They say that this is nothing but witchcraft, and that I'm a bad person and going to hell because I believe in astrology. That's not true. That's not true, and I can actually prove through scriptures that Jesus celebrated not only the full moon but the new moon as well. So, I'll start off by telling y'all. Oh shoot, stoner moment. Oh, I'm having a stoner moment. Hold up a second. I gotta stop it for a second. All right, I'm back. Stoner moment gone. So, one thing that Christians don't really understand because they just haven't been taught and they don't think about it for themselves is that Jesus was a Jewish astrologer. In order to understand what kind of practices and customs Jesus celebrated, you got to try and think back 2,000 years ago. And there's no Christian church back then. There's no Muslims back then. I'm not sure about Buddhists. I'm not 100% sure when the Buddhists came around, but they're not associated with Christians at all. So back in the day, pretty much every culture that had a form of spirituality and religious practices practiced those festivals according to various moon and sun cycles. And the Aztecs, the Incans over in South America, the native tribes up here in North America, and all throughout the world, the Celtics, the Druids, everybody, all their religious ceremonies were timed to the sun and the moon, and Christianity is actually no different. And I'll be including Easter Sunday when I say Christianity is no different. We'll get to that later. So, one thing that one thing that the Christians don't understand is that Jesus celebrated Jewish customs. They don't understand the laws of Moses as to what Jesus was actually following back in the day, because Jesus wasn't a Christian. Basically, he was a Jewish scholar, not necessarily a scholar. He was trained in the Jewish religion at the synagogue, and then went out preaching to the poor people. And eventually, he gathered a following, and it developed into the Christian church we know today. And in this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of information as to that history, how the Christian church developed, and a handful of astrological references in the Bible. And as you can see, I've got some information right up here that we're gonna fiddle through. And I got all of this stuff that's on my computer screen is copied and pasted from a website called BibleGateway.com. That is a very, very, very good site to go to if you have any Bible references. If you needed to search for any Bible references. And what I did is I simply went in and I typed in new moon. So I found nothing but positive things referencing the new moon. There was nothing negative about this phase in the cycle. And in all of the readings that I've done, I have found that this is actually the most mentioned of the celestial bodies, is the new moon cycle. So we're going to start off in the Old Testament. And I'm going to teach you, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to teach you a few things about the Bible. First off, it is divided into the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament are the scriptures and the writings pertaining to the beliefs that were before Jesus was born, and the New Testament is when Jesus was born and after. There are certain sections within the Old and New Testament that have different names. The Gospel is referred to as the first four books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And those are the works that were written when Jesus was alive. So during his he only preached for 3 years. So Jesus preached from the ages of 30 to 33, and then he was crucified on the cross, and then he was risen from the dead, and that's why we celebrate Easter. So once again, having this another stoner moment. So Jesus, all right, stopping the video. All right, I got the train of thought back. So the gospel is the first four books of the New Testament, and it describes works that were written while Jesus was living. There's also another section called the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible in the Old Testament, and they are referred to as the works of Moses. And they are the story of the beginning, the creation, and then how God's people were led from slavery in Egypt into the Holy Land, which we now call Israel. So in the there are 5 books. There are 5 books in the Pentateuch. Hence it's named Pentacle, Pentagon, 5 sides, Pentateuch, 5 books. And they are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So in Genesis, I'll describe these books a little bit. Genesis is the beginning, and a lot of people understand the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and how that Weasley snake got us kicked out. So we get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Then another story that a lot of people know from the Old Testament is Noah's Ark and the Great Flood. And so you got Noah's Ark. The Great Flood happens. Humanity starts to recover. And then this dude named Abraham comes along. God contacts Abraham, tells him to kill his son Isaac, and Abraham doesn't, so God says, hey, no. There's a whole story that goes with it. If you want to know it, go read the Bible. So you got Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac has a son named Jacob. Jacob ends up with a bunch of sons that eventually get named, that develop into the 12 tribes of Israel. So basically what happened is a dude named Jacob's got these 12 sons. One named Joseph gets sold into slavery down into Egypt. And again, this is all in the book of Genesis. So gets sold into slavery down in Egypt, goes back after a whole bunch of years. The brothers come down, find him, and they go back up. And they go back up into the Israel, Middle East area. I don't know exactly whereabouts they were living. It was northern Egypt, Cairo, pyramids era, pharaohs in Egypt type stuff. So Joseph goes back up. No. And then while some of his, Joseph was eventually made a dream interpreter and magician in Pharaoh's kingdom, and was actually a very, very, very well-known and very prominent person. So that's in the book of Genesis. Exodus is where Moses comes along. And what happens is Moses was a part of the enslaved Hebrew people, and then he went in the wilderness, had contact with God, came back, said, well, I'm going to lead y'all out of slavery. They made the movie 10 Commandments. He had the 12 plagues of Egypt, stuff like that, led the Egyptians wandering through the desert for 40 years, and then they got into the Holy Land. While they were wandering in that desert for 40 years, God told them that he wanted to be worshipped in a certain way. Oh, shoot. Hey, what happened to that? There, you see? I don't even know. That was last week's lesson. So I don't even know how that. Hey, this is wrong too. Either way, y'all heard about the 10 Commandments, Moses going up to Mount Sinai. Do I have 2 open? Okay. This is the one. That's the one I won't close. All right. So Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, gets the 10 Commandments. all that good stuff. So Moses gets the reason I'm telling you this is again, Jesus follows the laws of Moses. So if the laws of Moses say to practice astrology, that means Jesus more than likely practiced astrology. So you got the book of Exodus. Leviticus is where is where Moses has been is describing the rituals and how to build certain the tabernacle and religious structures, and certain religious equipment, ephods and breastplates, and all sorts of other cool rocks and gemstones type stuff. We're not dealing with that. Either way, so you got Leviticus just dealing with the Levites and how the Levites were the ones instructed to running the religious ceremonies. So it's the instruction to the Levites on how to run those religious ceremonies. That's the book of Leviticus. It's actually rather boring. Deuteronomy is also rather boring, and it's more of a history of it's very similar to Leviticus, where it's telling what to do with religious ceremonies. There are a couple references in there, and Numbers is talks about the 12 tribes and how many numbers were in each tribe, and that is actually where and it also does. A lot of these books have similar content because they're describing the same type of festivals and practices and ceremonies and stuff. So Numbers is where we're going to find the first reference to the new moon, and I got it right there, and I'm going to read it for you. It says, "Also at times of rejoicing, your appointed festivals and new moon feasts." That's where we get it. Appointed festivals, new moon feasts. You are to sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and they will be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. Sorry, I stumbled over that. So basically, that's what's saying is, yeah, they have these new moon feasts and other appointed festivals where we want you to sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and with fellowship offerings, grain and water and drinks and stuff like that. Oh shoot, I forgot to do something in the beginning as well. One of the ways that you read the Bible is through all of these books and chapters. When I say Numbers 10:10, I'm referencing the book of Numbers, chapter 10, verse 10. So this would be the book of Numbers, chapter 28, verse 14. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 3. And that's how you read through your Bible. So Numbers 24:14. With each bull there is to be a drink offering of half a hin of wine, with the ram a third a hin, and with each lamb a quarter of a hin. I'm assuming a hin is a unit of measurement, like, a cup of wine, half a cup of wine, whatever. This is the monthly burnt offering to be made during each new moon during the year. To me, that's another positive thing. That's saying once a month during the new moon, you're supposed to sacrifice the bull, the ram, the lamb, and some wine with it. That's what you're supposed to do. And the Levites were the ones who were in charge of making those sacrifices, helping you with those sacrifices. So after some more historical Hebrew stuff, we get into the book of Deuteronomy, where we get another new moon reference. And you kind of have to read this and interpret it in somewhat of an unusual way. It says, "And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed to bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord God has apportioned to all nations under heaven." Now, some people would say, hey, that's telling you not to worship the sun and the moon. And I say that's not to worship the sun as the moon as your individual gods, because God has apportioned them to all the nations under heaven. So that means the sun and the moon and the stars are for everyone, and that I'm not supposed to think that they are just for me. And that's what I think that Deuteronomy was saying. We got uh, Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 3. In contrary to my command, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them or to the sun or moon and stars in the sky. Now this one right here, yeah, I can kind of see how we can say that the sun and the moon and the stars are bad, but I more say that don't worship the sun and the moon and the stars as the ultimate God. Something created those sun and the moon and the stars, and that creator is the God. So don't think of the sun and the moon and the stars as the actual God, but as something that God created, below it. It, him, her, whatever. I don't even know. Okay. So, in Deuteronomy 33:14, there was a blessing had been cast when Jacob, his name got changed to Israel, died. He gave a blessing to all 12 tribes, and then Joseph was the youngest, and he was the magician. He was the visionary of the crew, and this is the thing he said about his son Joseph, just talking about the best things the sun and moon can bring forth. So that's the first part of my video, and I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to actually take a drink of coffee and take a bong hit and see if I can get a little bit more mindset on the next round. So I'll take a quick break, and y'all take a bong hit too. All right, I'm back. I got my coffee and my bong hit. All right. Another one of the more famous characters that a lot of people know about is a dude named King David. We've all heard the story of David and Goliath. Poor little sheep boy came up and whooped the ass of some big giant, 6-7 foot tall. I don't know how big Goliath was, 8 foot tall. I don't know. But so King David comes along, he slays Goliath, and he doesn't become king instantly. What happens is he works his way up as a great warrior and leader within the Jewish kingdom, and he was actually under the rulership of a dude named King Saul. And King Saul is the king that David took over for, in somewhat Game of Thrones type style. There was some attempted killings when it came to this. And this is in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 20, verse 5. And what's happening is King Saul was going to set up David, who wasn't king yet. Saul was going to set up David at something called the New Moon Festival. And so, not New Moon Festival, the New Moon Feast. And so once a month, they would have their monthly sacrifice, and they would have a huge feast, and David would sit next to Saul. At this event, Saul was going to kill David somehow. What happened was David's buddy Jonathan. Okay, this is the point in the video. I'd like to point out that nobody in the Bible was white, and their names probably weren't Jonathan or David or Saul. And pretty much, and everybody in the Bible is from North Africa, Middle East, Arab type area. So again, nobody in the Bible is white. So we got David is warned by Jonathan that at the new moon feast, King Saul was going to kill him. And it says, so David said, look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I'm supposed to dine with the king, but let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. So basically that's saying, hey, King David celebrated the new moon feast, and King Samuel celebrated the new moon feast. And here you say, First Samuel 20:24, it says, "So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat." So the book goes on to describe how David makes it out. King Saul's plan is foiled, and eventually King Saul gets killed. An interesting story in that book is before King Saul is killed, he goes to see a soothsayer called the Witch of Endor. And yes, Endor is an actual place, not just in Star Wars or anything like that. So King Saul goes to see the Witch of Endor, and she tells him how he's going to die. And it's actually pretty cool because it actually comes true. And so I did not include that. You're going to have to go reading in your Bible if you want to read about that. So we're going to scroll down a little more. This is in the book of Kings. There's another reference as to people were also celebrating the sun and the moon and stars with their idols like Baal. One thing that I read on was I read a book about Haitian voodoo, and it was rather interesting to see to recognize some of the names mentioned as ancient African spirits in the Haitian beliefs that were also mentioned in the Bible as the same names. It's rather interesting. Different story, different video. So this is First Chronicles. This is the Second Kings, because I can't remember who it was off the top of my head right now. One of the kings of Israel came through and wiped away all the idols and everything else, and included some of the ones to the sun and the moon and the stars. So a few more of these. First Chronicles. Where is it? See, it's the duty of the Levites was to help Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. New moon feast mentioned right there. I just got sick and tired of reading, so I'm not going to read it all. If you want to read, you're going to have to read it for yourself. Now what I am going to start talking about more is this right here. Many people have heard of the wisdom of King Solomon. He's another very prominent person in the Bible. Solomon was one of King David's children who eventually took the throne over from King David. King Solomon was very, very wealthy, had amassed a whole bunch of land, servants, concubines, all sorts of great things. Was a magnificent, extremely rich leader. Solomon built a magnificent temple to the Lord. And in 2 Chronicles chapter 2 verse 4, it talks about the temple to the Lord and how he wants to build an entire section dedicated to the new moon. So King Solomon went through this. It took all these resources, all this gold, all this timber, built this huge, massive temple for the Lord, and made sure to include a special section for new moon celebrations. So once again, the new moon. The new moon is very, very important according to the Christian Bible. 2 Chronicles 8:13 also talks about how Solomon sacrificed burnt offerings for the Lord. Ezra was one of the prophets to Israel, to the kings of Israel, and he's talking once again new moon sacrifices, stuff like that. Nehemiah and another prophet that talks about the new moon. Where is it at? New moon Sabbaths, at new moon feasts, and at the appointed festivals. This here's Psalm 81:3. I like it. I'll read that one out loud for you. Sound the ram's horn at the new moon and when the moon is full on the day of our festival. That's the Bible telling me to have a full moon and new moon festival. There you go. Anybody want to tell me I'm a devil worshiper for celebrating the full moon or the new moon? I'm following Psalm 81:3. Give me a trumpet. I'll go trumpeting around. I don't even know how to play the trumpet. So in Isaiah is actually the longest book of the Bible, longest book of the Bible. And Isaiah was a very, very well-known prophet to the kings of Israel. And here in the first chapter, 13, he's talking to Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, y'all, a lot of people have heard of Sodom and Gomorrah and how it was destroyed and whatnot. So here it starts in 10, and it talks about there's Sodom, there's Gomorrah, and it talks about how God's all pissed off at those two cities, and he doesn't accept their new moons and Sabbaths. Says, I hate your worthless ceremonies these days. Isaiah mentions right here in chapter 66, from one new moon to another, Sabbath to another, they're using it as a calendar, because this was before any type of calendar we got today, and they had it from new moon was their months. Ezekiel, another prophet, talking about new moons for appointed festivals and whatnot. Amos, gonna get down here at the bottom part. This is the part. This is another video. This is where they talk about actual astrologers. And where is it? Okay. This is the only passage in the New Testament that I could find that directly referenced the new moon. So it says, therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. And the Colossians, I'm not sure, can't remember who wrote the letter. I think it was Paul. I think it was the Apostle Paul wrote a letter. It was either Paul or Peter wrote a letter to the church of Colossus, and in it said, don't let anybody judge you on celebrating a new moon. So if it says in the New Testament that you're celebrating the new moon, that means that Jesus was celebrating the new moon. So there's how I've gotten to the path of Jesus celebrating the new moon, and simply because of that one little verse right here, Colossians 2:16. And then that leads me to believe, okay, Jesus practiced the laws of Moses. So once a month, Jesus was having a new moon festival, feast, sacrifice the bull or the ram, sound the trumpet, and drink your wine. And that's for the new moon. I could not find anything that was acknowledging the full moon other than that one verse in Psalms. And so I'm going to have to reference Easter Sunday and how that's determined as to why I believe that Jesus celebrated the full moon. For those of you that don't know, the Easter Sunday is determined by the first full moon after the spring equinox. So the spring equinox is generally March 19th and 21st. It changes from day to day, from year to year, but it's always around that time frame. So you got the spring equinox. The next full moon after that, the following Sunday, is Easter. So you say you have the spring equinox on the 20th of March, and then you have the full moon on the 29th of March. The next Sunday after that full moon on the 29th will be Easter Sunday. If the 29th is a Wednesday, Easter's the next Sunday. If the 29th is a Saturday, Easter will be the next day. It's always the next Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. And that's why I believe that Jesus celebrated both the full moon and the new moon. and it's because that's what my Bible tells me it did. So this may have been boring. I hope the audio's okay. I just recorded on a little iPad. We're gonna get we're gonna get into something. Oh hey, yeah, we're gonna get into something a little bit later in a different video. We'll deal with something called Enoch and the Watchers. So hope you enjoyed the video. Please watch all the other ones, and I'll keep making more. Have a nice day.